Well, good morning. This is Dr. Bill Wyatt, and I'm with the American Orthodontic Society, and I'm talking to my friends all over the world. I've been under the weather here, and I've been in the hospital and out, but I've talked to a lot of people, and they do not understand how the skull works and how the bone structure and everything works together in such a marvelous way for human beings. And for me to live this long, I don't really know how you are made and how you heal up and how things in your body can change and you can live. And I guess a few more years and people will be living to 120 maybe. I don't know. But it's sure rough when you get there. I tell you, I'm on my way to 98. I'm a month or so into the 98th year. And I still have functioning parts to my jaw. And the disc in front of the condyle is still there, and it's working good. And I've used it for over 90 years. So I want to enlighten people on what a blessing we have with the human skull. And I think it's so ridiculous that people donate their bodies to science and stuff like this, and yet we don't allow people to buy skulls. Like I bought mine maybe 50 or 70 years ago, and it has been a blessing to understand and see what really can happen. So I'm going to try to go through this. We got something like several thousand views of expanding the upper jaw. And people think that because they've been told that adults' bone doesn't move, this is such a big lie. I mean, this human skull and the human bone structure marvelously moves and develops with the body. I walked up to behind a man in the hospital that was in a wheelchair that looked like it was a bathtub on wheels almost. And I thought, my gosh. And I went around and looked at him, and here's a man that's about 400 pounds or more in a wheelchair. And the bone structure in his body had grown all his life, and he just neglected his died, and the man won't live long like that. And so the bone wasn't like the man's bone was when he was 25 years old or 30 or 40, but it just kept getting bigger and bigger and like that. And the whole thing changes. So let's get into this, and I'll try to enlighten people some about the skull. And I bought this skull I've got it's been over 60 years, I think, when I bought it. And then it became unpopular, and so they give plastic skulls, which can't even touch what a real skull is. And every doctor, everybody that works with human beings and how they work ought to own one of these skulls so they can see what God has put here for us to use. And this is the sign of the skull. This is the condyle. This is the fossa that works. And when I have a muscle, this is attached here and given from down here and pulls this jaw up and down every time you chew. and it's been moving all my life, and it's trillions of times that I've chewed together. And if you bite on something out here on the front part, you have overbite and overjet, this overjet and overbite like this. And when you bite something in the forward part, you move your front teeth together. This moves out. And when it moves out, it goes down. And so these teeth don't touch when you bite something in the front of the mouth. People don't realize that. And so if you put 10 pounds of force out here, the muscles will have to be pulling this jaw up and down. They go up and attach because it's the temporomandibular joint right here. The muscles are attached up to this part of the head. They go down and attach on this and all the way to the bottom. And you can bite, you can almost cut somebody's finger in two if you bit hard enough. And these teeth have been closing in my mouth for over 90 years that they've been there. Those are permanent teeth. They come in when you're start coming in when you're about 6 years old. And let's go, I've got just so many pictures here to show, and I'll go to them. Now here are the molars coming together right here. And if you bite your cheeks, and if you are breathing through your mouth, and your tongue's in the bottom part here, these teeth will move out on the outside of this, and you'll be chewing your cheeks. And I know this for a bald fact because I was a mouth breather and still am to some extent, and so my teeth bite my cheeks from time to time. And this is a mistake, and this is why we got so many views of widening the human jaw. And you can widen the human jaw just as wide as you want to get it out here. And so you widen it back up so that the teeth fit. If I look at it from the side, your bottom teeth would be something like this, and your upper teeth ought to be like that. And so this keeps you from biting your cheek right there. So if you don't breathe through your nose like you properly should, if your tongue stays down in this part of your body, I will guarantee you the weight of the tongue against these teeth will move them out. And not having the weight, these teeth will move in some like that. And you can look at a model and tell whether that person is a mouth breather or not. That is that simple. All right, let's get on. I've got so much to show you here, and I won't last through it all. Now, if I look at the terminates inside the nose, if you look at inside here, you've got a nasal septum which separates the two. There's 3 terminates, and then I'll just show one right here. These are covered with moist little cilia, thousands of zillions of them in there. They stay moist. If you breathe through your mouth dries out in about 10 minutes at night. And it'll get dry, and then this mucus forms. If you breathe through your nose, the body sends liquid in and it keeps these little tiny hairs on here just covered. And when you breathe past them, they pick up most of the impurities out of there. And those come down in your throat and you swallow them, and the acid in your throat usually kills them, or you blow your nose and clear it out. Now when we separate the palate, this will separate somewhere or another, and this part will go one way and this will go the other way. And we found out that we could separate people's mouths up into their 30s and sometimes in the early 40s. But if you can't separate the suture, it doesn't mean you can't widen the upper jaw. You can widen the upper jaw on anybody walking and breathing that's alive. As long as they're alive, you can expand the jaw. I don't care who tells you that you can't move adult's bone. You don't have to do anything but just put a slight pressure on one side and take it off of the other side, and the bone will move over to where the pressure is the same on both sides. And that is a fact, and it works on anybody at any age. I don't care how old they are. I had a man 45 years old that came in and his front teeth were sticking out, and he said, my teeth used to fit like this, and now his upper teeth were out this way. I said, well, do you suck your thumb? You don't smoke a pipe? You don't play a clarinet? You don't push it out? None of this stuff. I left the room, and he told the girl, he said, got to talking to her, said, I've been trying to stop smoking. So somebody told me if I put these little lozenges up in the roof of my mouth and hold them there, then I could stop smoking. So I've been pressing on that with my tongue, and that made his teeth go out when he was 45 years old. And people were saying, if you pull the teeth out like this, you'll move them out of the bone. This is a big lie. If you take a group of teeth, you can move them out and the teeth follow them along. Even if one of them is ankylosed, it'll stay on the bus with the rest of them. Well, I'm going to get behind here and won't be able to show you all this stuff. Well, this is where the sutures come together up here. And let me get on to another. Now this one is a little better view. This is the nasal septum one here. Here's the large turbinate. There's another one here and another one on up there. There are three on each side. And I may mess up some of this, but you can separate the palate up here, and this is the airway. And if this is closed up, and when this doesn't develop properly, you reduce the airway. So when you expand the upper, you got to keep the teeth parallel. So you have to use a rectangular wire with some buccal root torque in it, and then you take a big daddy and tie it on, and you put those two wires in there, and I can separate, or I can't do it now, anybody's march. I had a 300-pound man, a young man. We could not separate his sutures, but I just kept putting pressure in there, and I widened his upper arch where it fit over the lower arch in the proper way. And it can be done, and you can do it, and any dentist could do that. And this ought to be learned by dentists, and dentists ought to be taught how to do orthodontic work. Part of it, it may take a little longer to learn it and do it, but we've got videos on everything you can think about in teeth. There's over 1,000 videos I've put on in the last 9 years since I retired at 88, and we're still putting them on. And it's 97 years now. I retired at 88 to 97, and about 9 years in there. And we've put over 1,000 videos out there. Go all over the world, teach you everything. I spent probably $150,000 or $200,000 learning this stuff, and I'm giving it to you. And don't think it's worth nothing because it's free. I hope to God people will learn this throughout the world, and it'll help people get along in life. Life's hard enough as it is. Let's go now. This is the suture. This is looking up at the roof of the mouth right here, and this is the suture. When you separate the palate, the suture goes one way and it comes apart in here some way or another. But it stretches out. A lot of times the suture doesn't come apart so easy, but you can go in there and put pressure on it, and the vault may be up this way, and it'll tend to level out. In other words, you can back the profile of the face up out here simply by expanding. It'll expand like that, and it'll bring this in. All right, let's get on with another picture. Here is the thing cut in half right here. This is the anterior nasal area, spine sticking out here. Here's where the bone is. And for years, we were putting stuff back here, putting a separator in this area, and putting the bar. Don't let anybody put a separator on you with just a round wire, because the tooth will tip this way. And the crown will come out, but the roots will come in and even reduce the airway. And I look at stuff made, somebody says, well, we can make a palatal separator and just use one tooth right here and have a round bar on these teeth over here. These teeth will go out. This will go out some. This one over here may go out at the crown, but I'll guarantee you, you push the crown in, the root will go this way. If you want that root to go with it out here, you've got to put a rectangular wire over here and put what we call, this is the buccal side, and then bring the upper out, and you bring the crown out, and you bring the two together, and that increases your airway and puts the tooth in the position it ought to be in. The most of the bone to separate us out here, and we were pushing back here with a screw deal going out to these teeth like that. This was stupid. I mean, if you tried to push these teeth apart out here, you don't run out here to do it. You get it right here. So years ago, I figured put a spring deal in here and be going out. You could put a screw in the bone, or you can attach it to the teeth. It'd be better to put a screw in the bone on the sides and central, and you can separate things into their 40s on some people, most of them, and some of them through the 30s I've not had any trouble separating. I never published that in the thing, so people are doing it now. So let's get on to something else. Now, here are the terminates again. This is the nasal septum, and here's the 1, 2, 3 terminates. And these things are marvelous. They are covered with jillions of little hair. They're called cilia. And they are kept moist all year. You can go to bed at night and they'll be moist. You sneeze or something, it'll blow water through there, and it keeps these things moist all the time. And as you suck air in, you think you don't suck junk in. There's junk in the air you can't even see. If you've ever stacked hay in a barn and it gets covered with it, and a little nail hole in the tin roof of the barn goes down like this, and you looks like a stick with the dust going in there. We used to load hay in the barn, and you'd have to wear a wet handkerchief over your nose, or you'd have so much junk in there you go out there and spit on the ground, and it looked like mud almost from the dirt and the things that are in the hay would do that way. I can't tell you all I would like to tell you in this life. And let's go on now to something else. Here is the human skull. When you put your teeth together like this, the condyle doesn't touch up here. This is where you have this biconcave. This fits between there. This thing is kind of built like that. And your hood. Now, my condyle is fitting against this thin part right here of this. And it's been there for over 90 years. And it's still there. But it has the pressure you'd put up here is much more than what you'd bite out here. If you've been out here with 10 pounds, you probably, and the muscle is pulling this up in this area right here, the temporal muscle coming down in here, it's pulling that jaw too with probably 25 or 30 pounds of force in this area to get this to bite together out here. So you don't crack a nut with your front teeth, but you can break things with your back teeth back here. They're closer to the muscle, and you can put a lot of chew force here, and the force goes up here and here, and instead of here and here. When you bite with your front teeth, the force is here and here. You move your jaw forward, and you bite out here. If you've got the teeth right, you close here, you got pressure in this area, and you got pressure back here. This is marvelously made, and we have that. And it's a shame to see what people do with their skulls. I mean, get them banged around stuff. I'll show you some other things on here that'll be a lot more interesting to know. Now let's go. So if you look up here, this is where this double concave thing fits. It'll be thick, closes like this, comes up in here, and this closes, and this is the part that's not fed at all right here, but it is fed by synovial fluid coming through. If you get hit in the chin, and you can get that flow here, right here, it hits your ear. This is your brains are right behind this, right there. That's why people get knocked out a lot of times. And it swells up, and then the damage is this gets big, it swells up, and you keep chewing on it. You have to eat, and so you chew on it. And if you just continue aggravating, this swells up, the body's trying to heal it up, and it'll swell up, and you keep chewing on it, and every time you bite together, it puts force on a sore up here. And that's why I've had people come in with TMJ pain, and they would have, it's been hurting for years. Just not, sometimes not too much, sometimes you go to touch them, they'll jump and won't do it. This constant irritation of an irritated area, the pain goes to the headache, down the neck, the shoulders, all across the body. So if you're out there with a TMJ pain, I'll tell you, if you can move your teeth forward and keep them there, but when you move your teeth forward, this will be hitting out here, and this is dropped down, that move, those teeth don't touch over here, and that puts another pain on the thing. So you have to put a splint in, and you open this up and have something on the teeth back in the front part of the mouth, And when you bite down, the force goes up here rather than here and the front teeth over there. I don't know that you can understand what I'm talking about here exactly, but that's where you get the pain. And that's 90% of the TMJ pain comes from there. So you go to the doctor and your neck's hurting, so he gives you something for neck pain. Shoulders are hurting in different parts. I had a lady that spent all of her money doctoring everything around the head, and they finally told her there's nothing wrong with you. And the lady happened to come to my office, and I reached up and put my finger on the temporomandibular condyles, and you can take your jaw. Everybody that's out there, if you have a TMJ pain and you reach it, put your finger here and do the jaw, and you can follow this round. You can put some pressure on it, and if there's a sore in here, you will feel it. I've had people you can't even touch or get close to it. They won't let you touch it. And for a long time, the physicians did not know or didn't pay any attention to that part like that. I used to travel with a bunch of doctors, medical doctors now, and we all had to make a speech to them. I always talked about the temporomandibular joint to the doctors, and they had no education about how the TMJ works and everything. Now, I think it's better known now, and so maybe they'll wise up and go ahead. The pain in the head is coming from here, pain in the shoulders, the neck, and I roll around like this, coming from the joint right there. You clear the joint up, and I'll almost guarantee you the other things will just disappear. So let's go on to something else here. Now, if you look at these condyles, they're not exactly a rectangle. They're kind of curved down like that. Now, if I want to eat on the right side, I reach over here. These teeth will touch. This condyle won't come out of the socket. The other one over here does come out, so that the teeth on the side you're not chewed on don't touch. If you do the other way around, the teeth over here will touch, and these don't touch. Now, this is a marvelous way that we were made and created, and the way it works like that. If I bite with my front teeth, it touches here, here, and here. These don't touch, these don't touch. So the force on the muscles back here closing, that force has to be more than it is out here. I mean, if we take a hand, for instance, have a 10-pound weight in it, or raise it up here, you look at this ligament, it'll be out in front, and the ligament's in front of your elbow, and that's make a jaw go up and down. And you can put tremendous force on your jaw. Those are some muscles that everybody uses. So let's get on here. I hope you understand. Now, there's springs were put on the skull to kind of illustrate what the muscles do. Now, you see the shape of the condyle. So the condyle function over here and over here. It can't be straight. You can spend thousands of dollars on typodonts, and there'll be a round ball out here working on it. That's not the way it is. Use the human skull and the human jaw for your typodont. It doesn't cost you anything, and that's where you learn about it. So if you want to find out about the pain, just relax your jaw and kind of open and close it, and I'll guarantee you, if you don't let the teeth hit the jaw will open and close where it feels comfortable. And you ought to mark that with a pen. You could go get you a football mouth guard if you were out somewhere and put it in your mouth and put it in place. And you've got these marks where you need to close to. And you line those up and touch together, but leave a space in there about like that. So you got a cushion. If you get hit in the mouth, you can bite against that. It doesn't bang your teeth together. But you can't put a ramp on there to make your jaw go out. And a ramp on a cushion like that is all in the world of sprint is. But someone has to know what the heck they're doing, and they don't teach it in school. That's what gets me. I mean, this a vital thing to teach people in school. They ought to know those things. So let's get on to something else here. This is the way that the jaw chews. Don't think about this in one side. Think about everything in a circle, both sides working. And when I eat on one side, this other side comes up over the fossa and it separates the teeth over here when I'm biting on the teeth on this side. Or if I'm biting on these teeth right here, both of the jaws move forward and you got the load is here and here and here. And it has to be a lot more force back here than it is up here, because the muscles are pulling up from this part, not in there. I hope you can sit down and understand this. You can't flip through it like you're looking through the pages of a catalog and learn what is there for you to know. And I've spent, I know, $150,000 or $200,000 and traveled all over this country and in a lot of places and different places to listen to good people that knew what they were talking about. And yet, the orthodontists are not teaching restorative dentistry through orthodontics. And I've learned how you could do away with about 85 to 90% of the surgical treatment of the class 3 cases and class 2 cases simply with orthodontics. It can be done, and restorative dentistry can be done. I've got cases showing it, and it can be done. I know it can be done, and you can do it. So, for God's sakes, if you're a regular dentist and you want to learn about this, just keep trying and keep reading. The very group that I have nurtured through 50 years, I joined it and helped start it. And now that I'm out of it, they want to go back and make money and not know what the heck to do. I've got it out here, and they think they can't do it as well as other people around. A few of them do, and that's the way it needs to be done. Why the universities don't treat and teach complicated orthodontics is beyond me. They're the ones that ought to treat the hard stuff and the easy things. Let general dentists or anybody, and the idea that a pediatric dentist shouldn't do. I've got about 20 or 25 things a pediatric dentist ought to know how to do, and do it as the person grows old. Don't sit around and wait for somebody that's 7 or 8 has a problem until they're 12 or 14. It's already messed up. So the pediatric dentist ought to be doing their own orthodontics and the orthodontist ought to be doing the complicated restorative and the expansion and all these things. This is the way orthodontics ought to be done. Now I'll be dead and gone, and it may take another 40 years for people to wander in the wilderness like the Jewish people did coming out of Egypt before they went in and did something to get their own country going. Now let's get on to something else here. This is the way the jaw is. Don't think about it. There's a sheet of paper over here. It's two of them going in there. That's what's happened. And when you bite with your front teeth out here, you're going to take the load here, here, and here. The muscles from here and the muscles from here are closing the jaw right close to this place. So this has to be many more force than this out here. When you're biting here, you're closer to the muscles. You can bite with a lot of force there. Everybody working with a human being ought to have a skull cleaned up and made like this. I just thank God that I got a hold of this early. You go look at a plastic skull. You don't have 1/100th of the knowledge in that you get in the real thing. This is cortical hard bone. This is cancellous bone. This is the blood supply goes to each root of the teeth right there. That's what you need to understand that. Now, let's get on. These springs were put on there just to kind of duplicate where the muscle force was here, here, and it goes up that way. And it pulls the jaw forward on the skull. Now, they got a thin saw and it's cut through there. This is cancellous bone right here. If I'm going to widen this tooth and I'll push up here, it is idiotic and stupid beyond belief that the slabs will crown one tooth here and put a bar over here and here and expand the mandible. If they do that, I will guarantee you the crown, when the crown goes out, it rotates somewhere around in here. The roots come in and the crown goes out, and your airway, if this were up above, will be even less sometime when you expand it. It is ridiculous. The labs ought to know you've got to band these teeth in here, and it would be better if you band that one. And you got all these bands tight on the teeth, so when you put a palatal separator, it carries the band and the tooth goes out. Otherwise, you ought to get on the other side with a rectangular wire and do the buccal root torque while you're doing crown torque to keep them out straight. Let's go now to something else. Now there's just an open picture. This was all on the skull. You can sit down and study this skull for days and not even halfway understand and know what's going on in the human body, and why we give each person a plastic skull and people donate their bodies. In our anatomy lab, we had lots of cadavers that we worked on. And I had the skull of our cadaver. I took it home. That was against the law, but I thought they're going to just burn it or bury it or something. And I carried that skull home, put it up in the attic, and my cousin's children grew up. They got up there and got the message, and they found that skull, and they thought somebody had killed somebody on purpose and put them up there. All right. Now, when you get my age, the nerve calcifies all the way up. You can go in there and feel the teeth. You won't feel a thing in the world except a burr bouncing around in there, grinding the tooth off. The nerve is gone in there. All right, let's get on. That's it again. Look at the cancellous bone. Now here's where our blood forms. All kind of things. The body uses the cancellous bone, the area for that. When you bite on a tooth, it's connected with a periodontal membrane like that. It has a slight cushion to the tooth. If a tooth gets ankylosed, it will get mashed and bumped against the outside and bleeds, and maybe the tooth grows to the bone here. That tooth cannot be moved by itself, well, this one, but you can move the whole group, and this goes with the group. But you've got to go in and luxate, break this attachment, and then you can move this tooth like other teeth. All right. What I'm saying in a few words, people can talk for hours on it. Now that's the way the nerves go into the root of the teeth. Here is where the muscle goes down and attaches here too. And the jaw muscles are one muscle first people use. I mean, you chew gum 1,000, millions, gillions of times. Your mouth's been opened and closed. Look how marvelously made this is. Now, if your teeth fit together, everybody that does any kind of athletics at all ought to wear a cushioned mouth guard. In other words, you made for the teeth and have a space in here about like that. And if you want to have it tied to your helmet or whatever, then tie it in there. If you go in and get hit, you know you'll get hit, you bite your teeth together. Then if you get hit in the jaw stays there, and it just pushes the whole head back like that. If you don't have it, it'll push the jaw up against the ear and put force on the brain in here and knock you out. And so it goes through there. Now if you pull a tooth, the cancellous bone, the cortical bone is around the tooth right here. And in that day, this goes away, starts going away. And if you keep this gap open, you'll have a knife edge ridge of bone right in here. And people said, you can't move a tooth through the knife edge. You can do it if you just pull, but it takes a long time to move it together there. If you go to do restorative dentistry with orthodontics and you lose a tooth here, you ought to have braces on here and just start closing that space that day. You can close it in 1/10 of the time it'll take you to close one where you've got a knife edge ridge trying to pull teeth into that. Now that's a big story and that'd take you hours to get through it. All right, looking at it from the bottom, here's the nasal septum and here's the terminates over here. Now, the spinal cord goes through this area right here. Race car drivers now, I looked at some of them getting in the cars the other day on the 500 race. and they all had a stiff, real stiff thing going right up behind their head, touching their head. They get hit at 200 miles an hour, it'll pop the head back so far it has separated, it'll cut the spinal cord in two. And they get hit like that. So they have a real strong deal across the back of the head going way up here. So now if they get hit, it goes back, it holds their head in the same place and doesn't cut their spinal cord in two. So let's go on now. All right. This is the orbit around the eye up here. And this is the fossa right here where the condyle fits in this area, and it is fixed so that the condyle can move from one side to the other. This is the ear opening, and the brains are back there. Now somebody put some pad between here to recommend the opening where the condyle fits into that, takes the place of that opening. This is the semicircular canals to tell you where you are, and here is the way it works. It's complicated as all get out, and you can do it. There's a sinus right back here, and the nephroid sinus. You have sinuses all around. You got about 7, I believe. That's the inner ear now, looking in through the skull. If you got a plastic skull, you might as well forget it. They don't even begin to put what's in the real skull, what you really need to know, and why in the devil we made it against the law to sell these skulls like that. If people want to donate their body and their skull, I know they were getting people from the Ganges River from India or something and taking them down. Maybe that's not good. But anyway, that's what people ought to have. Now when you look at somebody, you're separating the palate. This is where most of the bone is, right out here and right in this part mostly. So if you put a screw in the bone here and put a expanding arch in here with a big spring, and you put force on it, and you put this in here, this is where you separate it back here. We used to be separated back here. I stopped. Donald Timms wrote the book on separating teeth, and I went to hear him in New York, and people were lined up behind me, and I asked him, how old could he separate somebody? He said, oh, about 17 or 18, and I just walked away. I didn't say it. I'd been separating people's palates in their 30s and a few of them in their 40s. I didn't want to keep all these people lined up to talk to it. Here are the terminates in here. There they are again. That's one terminate, a big terminate. These are covered in jillions of little cilia that's kept moist. If you load hay like I did when I was younger in a barn and it's so dusty, that stuff catches all over this. This will just be covered with that kind of stuff. And you will suck it up and spit it out and look like dirt. Again, here's one of the sinuses here, and you got a little sinus right here. You got a frontal sinus up in this area, and there's a center sinus back in this area right here. Okay, They're sitting by that. That's not exactly where they are. Now there's a picture of the turbinates. There's 1, 2, 3 turbinates. And if you are allergic to something, this swells up right here and you can't breathe through your nose. And so where you've got to get air, so you breathe through your mouth, then the tongue doesn't get up and spread this out, and you'll develop crossbites. And then you have a bilateral crossbite or a single crossbite. And you need, if somebody comes to you like that, the first thing they need is their palate separated and move the teeth out where they ought to be, and then have an ENT guy work on their allergies. All right. Now realize this video is going on and on and on, and you get tired of looking at it. Well, just look at it in part, if you will, because I don't have time to go through every detail on this thing. But I don't want to die and go to wherever I'm going. I'm not going to say. I hope to God there's a place for us there. But I went to the people years ago at the Baylor Dental College is where I went to Baylor, and I went to Baylor Dental School. And I went to the people in the dental school a few years out, realizing what ought to be taught, and I talked to the head of the department. I said, teach people orthodontics. Quit hiding the information, you know, under a basket so nobody will know about it. Everybody ought to know about it. Orthodontics ought to be like other things. Simple, easy stuff can be done by most anybody if you learn how to put brackets and things on. And then if the people taught at universities are able to do the tough stuff, that's what they ought to do. I stayed there close to the Baylor deal. I knew dentists that went there with a problem for their children or something, and they said, well, you can't do that. They took it to another orthodontist. You can't do that. And I don't think the guy would mind me saying, when I put T-Bob Davis of Dallas, a very prominent dentist, son had an impaction. They said, you can't take it out. He found out what I was doing, brought the young man over there, and we pulled that cuspid out there and put it in place. And that was, and the people in the orthodontic school hate my guts, really, because I was doing anything that came down the track, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do that. So anyway, I'm going to say goodbye today, and I may not be back. I'll try to see some other things and talk maybe about TMJ pain a little bit more. So thank you for watching, and I'll sign off now. Well, I thought I would. Okay, farewell, and I'll stop.